The morning was colder than usual, the kind of cold that seemed to seep through wool and bone alike. Mist clung stubbornly to the small town of Whitbrook, wrapping the cobbled streets and sleepy shops in a ghostly hush. The bakery at the corner, famous for its honey rolls and morning chatter, hadn't yet opened its doors, and the only sound came from the rhythmic sweep of an old broom on the steps of a little tea shop, the Golden Teapot. The shop belonged to Clara Ellis, a woman of quiet grace and faded smiles. She had inherited the tea shop from her grandmother 20 years ago, and for as long as anyone could remember, Clara had been the soul of Whitbrook's mornings. She served tea with a kindness that warmed hearts faster than any kettle could. But lately, her laughter had dimmed, replaced by a silence that even her loyal customers noticed. Her husband, Henry, had passed away 3 months ago. A sudden heart attack had stolen him from her one golden afternoon, leaving her adrift in a sea of quiet rooms and half-finished cups of tea. Still, she opened the shop each day, because Henry had always said, kindness must never close its doors. And so, even in her grief, she kept them open. That morning, as Clara arranged the jars of loose tea leaves along the counter, Earl Grey, Jasmine Pearl, Peppermint Mist, and her grandmother's secret blend she called Sunrise Comfort, the bell above the door tinkled softly. A man entered, shivering under a worn coat, his shoes muddy and his face weary. He looked to be in his late 30s, though the hollows under his eyes made him seem older. "Good morning," Clara greeted, her voice soft but steady. "You're out early. What can I get you to warm up?" The man hesitated, eyes darting toward the counter before lowering. "Just the cheapest tea you've got," he muttered. I don't have much on me." Clara studied him gently. There was shame in his tone, the kind that comes from too many nights of hunger and too many days of being unseen. She smiled faintly, the corners of her lips trembling just a little. "I think," she said, "you could use a proper cup today." "My treat." The man looked up, startled. "No, I couldn't." "You can," she interrupted kindly. "Everyone deserves warmth once in a while." He opened his mouth to protest again but saw the calm certainty in her eyes and fell silent. Clara moved behind the counter, her movements practiced, graceful, almost meditative. The kettle began to hum as she spooned leaves into a pot, her Sunrise Comfort blend, a mixture of chamomile, rose petals, and something indefinably sweet. While the tea brewed, she set a small plate of scones on the table near the window and gestured for him to sit. The man hesitated before sinking into the chair, his hands clasped tightly, as if afraid of breaking something invisible. "What's your name?" she asked. "Evan," he replied after a pause. "Evan Carter." "Well, Evan Carter," she said, pouring the tea, "this blend is special. My grandmother used to say it has a way of mending more than just the cold." He gave a small, uncertain smile as she placed the cup in front of him. Steam rose, carrying a soft, floral scent that seemed to thaw the air. He lifted the cup to his lips, and for the first time in days, perhaps weeks, he felt something other than emptiness. "This is incredible," he murmured, almost in disbelief. "It tastes like," he trailed off, searching for the word. "Home," Clara finished softly. "That's what most people say." He nodded. "Yeah. Like home." For a while, silence filled the shop, a comfortable one this time. Evan ate the scones slowly, savoring each bite. Clara watched him, her heart aching with an odd tenderness she hadn't felt since Henry's passing. There was something about this stranger, his quiet gratitude, the way his hands trembled slightly as he drank, that reminded her of her husband when they had first met. Evan set the cup down gently, his eyes misting. "I lost my job 3 months ago," he said suddenly, as if confessing to the tea itself. "Construction work. Company folded. Then I lost my apartment last week. Been sleeping at the station." He laughed dryly. "Didn't think I'd end up here, drinking fancy tea." Clara didn't flinch. "Sometimes," she said, "we end up in places that are meant to find us, not the other way around." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw the sorrow hidden behind her calm demeanor. "You've lost someone too, haven't you?" he asked gently. She nodded. "My husband, Henry. He used to sit right there, by the window, every morning. Said he liked to watch the world wake up." Her eyes softened. "He always believed a kind word or a cup of tea could fix almost anything." "I think he was right," Evan said, lifting his cup slightly. They shared a small, knowing smile. The kettle whistled again, and Clara refilled his cup. The second brew was lighter, more delicate, and somehow, it seemed to taste even better. As the morning wore on, customers began to trickle in. Clara moved among them with her usual grace, but she always returned to Evan's table, refilling his cup, offering another pastry, sharing small bits of warmth that didn't need words. When he finally stood to leave, he reached into his pocket, fumbling for coins. "Please, let me pay something," he said earnestly. Clara shook her head. "You already have. You reminded me that kindness still matters." That was payment enough. Evan looked at her, his throat tight. "I'll come back someday. I'll pay you properly." "I'll be here," she replied. He left, and as the bell above the door chimed, Clara felt something stir in her chest, a faint, fragile flutter of hope. Days passed. The leaves outside turned from gold to brown, and winter crept closer. Clara continued her quiet routines, though now, the mornings didn't feel quite as heavy. She often thought of Evan and wondered where he was, if he had found a place to sleep, if he had managed to start over. One snowy morning, she arrived at the shop to find a small envelope tucked under the door. Inside was a note in uneven handwriting. "Dear Clara, thank you for the tea, and for reminding me what kindness feels like. I found work again, just a small job at the lumberyard, but it's a start. When I can, I'll come back for another cup. Until then, please know you helped me more than you'll ever realize. Evan." Tears welled in her eyes as she read it. She placed the note under the counter beside Henry's old teacup and whispered, "You were right, my love. Kindness never closes its doors." Months rolled by. The snow melted, and spring returned to Whitbrook, painting the streets with blossoms. Business in the Golden Teapot grew busier, but Clara's favorite moments were still the quiet mornings before opening, when the shop smelled of lemon polish and steeping leaves, and the sunlight danced through the window. One afternoon, just as she was closing up, the bell tinkled again. She turned, expecting a last-minute customer, and froze. Evan stood there, clean-shaven, better dressed, a faint scar above his eyebrow she hadn't noticed before. He smiled, shy but warm. "Miss Ellis," he said softly. "I promised I'd come back." Clara's eyes filled with tears she didn't bother to hide. "You did." "I've been saving up," he said, pulling a small pouch from his coat. "I want to pay for that tea." She waved her hand. "Nonsense. Sit down. The kettle's already on." But he shook his head, placing the pouch on the counter. "Please. I insist. Anne. I'd like to buy 2 cups today." Clara raised an eyebrow. "2?" He smiled. "1 for you. You've served everyone else long enough. Let someone serve you for a change." Her breath caught. For a long moment, she said nothing, then nodded slowly. Together, they sat by the window, Henry's old seat, and sipped the same sunrise comfort blend. The sun dipped low, spilling amber light across the shop. Evan told her about his new job, how he'd found a small apartment nearby, how he'd been helping others at the shelter where he once stayed. "I remembered what you said," he told her. "About kindness finding you. I figured maybe I could pass that along." "That's how it works," Clara said softly. "Kindness travels. It's like tea, you steep it in someone else's heart, and the warmth spreads." They sat in companionable silence, 2 souls who had been broken in different ways but somehow helped mend each other. The shop around them seemed to glow with quiet magic, as if the walls themselves were listening. When the evening light faded, Evan rose to leave. He hesitated at the door, then turned back. "Clara." "Yes. I know it's not my place, but have you ever thought about reopening the reading corner? I saw the empty shelves in the back." Her eyes softened. The reading corner had once been Henry's idea, a small space for people to sit, read, and share tea freely. She had closed it after his death, unable to bear the memories. But now, the thought didn't hurt as much as it once had. "Maybe it's time," she said quietly. "I could help," he offered. "Build new shelves. Fix the lighting." She smiled. "I'd like that." Over the following weeks, Evan helped her restore the little corner of the shop. Together, they painted the walls a soft cream, lined the shelves with donated books, and hung fairy lights along the ceiling. Clara even found Henry's old sign, a small wooden plaque that read, "A cup of tea and a kind word can heal any heart." When they reopened the corner, townsfolk gathered to see it. Children curled up with storybooks, old friends shared quiet laughter, and the scent of sunrise comfort filled the air. As Clara watched it all, she felt Henry's presence, not as a pain this time, but as a gentle warmth, like the steam rising from a freshly poured cup. Later that evening, when the crowd had gone and the shop was still, Evan poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to her. "You know," he said softly, "you healed more than just one heart that day." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "No," she whispered. "We healed each other." Outside, the sky deepened into twilight, and the light from the golden teapot spilled warmly onto the cobblestones. Inside, 2 cups sat side by side on the table, steam curling upward like fragile threads of connection, threads that had bound 2 broken souls and stitched them gently back together. And from that day on, anyone who stepped into the golden teapot swore the tea there tasted different, sweeter, somehow, as if every drop carried the memory of a kindness once shared, a promise once kept, and a love reborn in the simplest of acts, a single cup of tea that healed 2 hearts.